8-figure business. I've been fortunate enough that any company that's ever survived the test of time, we all know the statistics of how companies don't make it past year two. And so what I've always done well is created revenue. Generating new sales, new business has never been a difficult thing for me. I was doing over $2 million in revenue at the time in a way that I never had. And I was able to do within 2 years what took me 10 years to do.
What's going on, guys? Today we are joined by Paul Gardner. Paul, I'm not even going to try to butcher your introduction because you're just a part of so many different businesses. So for starters, do you mind just sharing to the extent you can what businesses you're actually a part of?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so I got into business about 25 years ago now. Started out in the sign industry. I actually was employed by a trucking company for about 4 years in the summer times. When I'd come home from college, I'd go put decals on the side of trailers and trucks. And I thought, oh, I'll just do this as a little side hustle and start a sign company, when in fact all I had done is put decals on cars. But um, the fact is, I got into the business and got married, right out of college, and had children, and so I had to survive. So my whole platform was built on surviving more than anything, and so that's really where I got my start. And then obviously I've been fortunate enough to acquire existing companies that were failing, or maybe the owner was retiring. And then I did some startup companies, things that interest me, things that I felt like I could make better industry wise. And some I'm my more the areas that I'm more or less looking to be involved in isn't necessarily things I'm passionate about, but things that I really interest me from the perspective of, I see a flaw in this industry. I see something that I can make better. And that those kind of things interest me. I guess that's my passion, is making things better. And so I ended up over the years in my sign industry, I was always using masons and bricklayers to do some of the entryway signs. And I ended up buying a 25-year-old design build landscape company. So we do a lot of residential work, outdoor patios, outdoor kitchens, pool decks, you name it. We pretty much anything outdoor living we do. That led me into, so I'm a UL certified manufacturer in the sign industry. We're not your typical small, sign shop. We build manufacturer signs for all over the country. And that led me into buying this landscape company, which led me into buying a lighting company. Or I say buying a lighting company, I started a lighting company. So we do all lights outdoors, more or less landscape lighting, permanent lighting. And also we do Christmas lighting, which I have a Christmas light company that runs on this loan called Elf Pros. And we opened 3 new locations this year. And we've been, building our Christmas light company to more or less have a demographic that fits ours here locally, and build them in different areas of Virginia. And then our idea is to maybe franchise it. So that's where I'm at. That's kind of what I'm into. I'm into a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I know that's awesome. So I mean, it sounds like you're not looking necessarily for what you enjoy doing, what you love doing, but more so where you see the most opportunity and where you can provide the most value.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's a long-winded version of a short story of a big story.
Yeah. And so to this day, then, how many businesses are you part of in total?
6.
6. Okay. Do you mind sharing like what the combined value, combined annual revenue, kind of any numbers like that?
So we're 8-figure business. So we're doing really well. This year, my whole goal has been to focus more on what we are netting as a company. What is our profit margin percentages? And so, I've been fortunate enough that in any company that's ever, survived the test of time, not even 10% of companies do $1 million in revenue. That's
Mhm.
it's a startling figure if you think about it, right? Because we all know the statistics of how companies don't make it past year two, or I mean, it's very rare to make it to year five. Most goals going in, it's $1 million. That's like the plateau. And if you've ever hit that $1 million mark, you'll realize that it isn't as easy to get to that $2 million mark. And then everything you did to get to the million, to 2 million, or even to the million is going to take a lot more to get to the 3 million, the 4 million. And you have to make changes. You're constantly, yeah, I like the name of your company, yeah, Evolve. I mean, you definitely have to evolve if you really want to survive the test of time. And so what I've always done well is creating revenue. Creating revenue, generating new sales, new business has never been a difficult thing for me. But what I did realize, even this, I mean, here I've been doing business for almost 25 years now. Um, Here I am running these business successfully, growing these business successfully. And even myself took my eyes off of, okay, what is our percentage of profitability this year? And I realized in this last year, we decreased in certain areas. And so I was like, you know what? I need to quit focusing so much myself on our overall combined sales. So literally, I'm not even looking at our sales as much anymore. I'm focused on every month, what percentage of profitability did we leave, the month with that? And I want to grow that. Um, Different industries have different percentages. And I'm a numbers guy. But my goal ultimately is that every company is profiting over 30%, which in most cases is on the high of averages. So I hear a lot of guys, especially in the Christmas light world, there's a lot of guys that talk about, oh, we were 50, 60, 70, 80% profitable. They probably don't know their true cost of doing business. And I've been doing this long enough to know that if you're going to get that million to 2 million plus, you're going to see your percentages decrease to some level because you're going to have a lot more manpower. You're going to have a lot more overhead. I mean, I can remember even 10 years ago, if you had told me that my cost of doing business was over $500,000 a month, that would have blew my mind. I would have been like, what? So it's almost hard to consider, when people look at my revenue, because I am in a different league of revenue, to think of anything me as being elite in the numbers game. But the reality is, even myself cannot be doing well as a business. And like I said, we did so well through COVID with the percentages and the margins, and we were having to keep up with the times that we were currently living in. The cost of goods was much higher. I was charging in some of my companies, I was charging a fuel charge, which I'd never done in 20 years. And so, but no one batted an eye about it. All the clientele was willing to pay 50 extra dollars for fuel charges. So there was a lot of things that we adjusted to change with the times. Now we've realized that, okay, things are adjusting a little bit for the good, some for the bad, and maybe we're not adjusting ourselves. And so we saw a little dip in our profitability. Now we still had a very profitable company and we're very fortunate, but it's just the thing I'm focused on from here out. But yeah, I've been very fortunate that I've gotten my numbers into the area that I guess I never dreamed of. If you had asked me even 15 years ago if that was a goal of mine, it wasn't, because I hadn't achieved the smaller goals in life. But I've learned how to scale a business and continue to scale. But I think the most important thing here is make sure you scale it with profitability in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, with any business, you want to, maybe you don't want to sell it, but you want to build it to sale. You want to be as valuable as possible. And in doing so, I mean, there's multiple levers you can pull. Initially, it sounds like the lever you're trying to pull is just revenue, and that's kind of like a vanity metric. But in the beginning, if you don't have revenue, have nothing. But at this point, it seems like you guys have more than enough revenue, but the profit margins is what you're focused on now.
Yes, absolutely. And there's, what I would suggest this to the smallest of companies that you work with or that are watching, this podcast right now, is the fact is we have so many opportunities to grow our businesses. There's obviously opportunities to sell things. I mean, if you're in the power washing business, if you're in the Christmas light business, there's not too many people or homeowners that wouldn't use your services at some point. Everybody needs, a good cleaning around their home at some point. The reality is, though, I might not be profitable doing it. And profitability ultimately is what allows you to survive. So whether you're doing $50,000 a year or you're doing 50 million a year, if you're not profitable, what's the point? And I realized a long time ago in the sign industry that I was undercutting myself. I really didn't know the true value of my services, nor did I understand what it really was costing me to do what I was doing on a daily basis. And when I really broke it down, it shocked me. And I've told this story before, but I'll tell it in a short version of it. But I can remember now that you got to keep in mind, I was in business for almost 10 years when this happened. And I was running what most people would classify as a successful company. I was doing over $2 million in revenue at the time. And I was larger than most sign companies in my area. Now, there was definitely sign companies that were much larger than me at the time. But I remember sitting down with a guy. We were actually in Las Vegas. We were at a sign show, and there was about 10 or 12 of us that ended up in this restaurant together afterwards. I didn't even know most of these guys. We just all met at the show. And we were at this restaurant at the Mandalay Bay, and I'll never forget it. We were sitting out on the balcony of this restaurant. It was the only balcony seating, but it sat enough for our size table that we got the privilege of being out here on this balcony. And it turned out there was a Snoop Dogg concert that was going on right below us. So generally, I wouldn't go to a Snoop Dogg concert, but I ended up at the Snoop Dogg concert and watching all the people come in. It was kind of an interesting dynamic with all of us sign guys up there watching a Snoop Dogg concert. Um, but anyways, I'm sitting there talking to this guy who's from New York, and when I say New York, I'm not talking about New York City. I'm talking like he was in a desolate area where there wasn't a lot of opportunities in his current area. He actually was telling me most of his business was 45 minutes to an hour away. And then when I told him where I lived in Fredericksburg, Virginia, how it was growing, there was plenty of business. He was picking my brain. He wanted to learn from me. So next thing you know, we're discussing pricing. And I came to realize his prices were almost double what I was charging on a regular basis. In every way you could consider doubling your prices, he was already there. And I thought to myself, he looked at me and he actually said, Paul, I'm shocked that you're pricing your minimum charges at this and your labor rates at this when it seems like to me in your area you'd be able to get a lot more. And I said, well, and I remember my comment because I kind of felt stupid afterwards. I was like, well, I know what everyone else is charging in my area. That was my comment. And right then when I said that, I was like, wait a minute. I just told him how we try to do everything better, how we deliver a better product, how we deliver a better service. But yeah, I'm comparing myself to the averages, which the majority of companies are just that. They're average or below average. Yeah, I'm pricing right in the same average, markets that are delivering less quality, less service. And so he goes, that's my point. You shouldn't be charging that. And I was like, you're right. It shouldn't. He said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, I guess I need to go home and change my prices. And I've shared this story many times, but this is no exaggeration. That was on a Friday, Saturday when we sat down and broke bread together and shared this intervention of Paul on pricing. On Monday, I doubled my prices across the board for all my labor rates, all my minimums. When it came to some of my square foot prices, I was almost doubling those. And I can tell you this, Michael, I can't even tell you that it hurt my business in any way, shape, or form. If I did lose a client or two, I'm very unaware of it. I don't even think people realized I changed prices. Even clients I was doing, work for on a consistent basis, I announced it to them and said, hey, look, we're having a price increase. We have some minimums. This is some things that we're doing to adjust to better serve you. No one even thought of it as a bad thing. And overnight, I saw the profits. And with those profits, I was able to multiply the business, in a way that I never had been able to prior. And I was able to do within 2 years what took me 10 years to do. And then I've just been able to do that over and over and over again. So I think a lot of times companies, generally speaking, try to value themselves specifically for their area. And I feel like that's so wrong, and especially in the Christmas light industry. I mean, I have Christmas light installers right now all around me. We are by far the largest Christmas light installer in our area. And we have Christmas light installers that are charging anywhere between $3 and $6 a foot. And we're getting 10 to 12 all day. I mean, that is our average. Our average ticket this year was 27.30. It's something that we're doing all the time, whereas most guys out there in our area probably aren't even getting $1,000 for their average home. So I could share with you story after story where that just doesn't hold up. Where guys are only pricing themselves to be on the average level and grow their businesses. It's in every industry I'm in, and I'm in, multiple industries that are not specific to each other. That shows that it works in every industry. And I've been able to do that multiple times, multiple ways. So I think it's important that any company that going in to specifically look at themselves and say, okay, what kind of business do I want to be? Do I want to offer a premium service? And in the power washing industry, now I will admit I'm not in that industry, but I've had power washing services. And I can tell you there's a difference in power washing services. I share this story too because my brother works for a power washing company, and they're not lit, they it's just a couple guys, and my brother works specifically for the owner. Um, Now I've never given my brother any advice. I've never tried to guide him or the owner of his company. But if I were to advise him, I would share this information with him. So hopefully maybe he's watching, this himself. But you know, there's a guy in my town that does extremely well. He's actually in the Christmas light industry as well. He has come to do my house, power wash my house, done a soft wash on the roof, and even did my concrete driveway. He did my 3-car garage. He charged me $2,700, so almost what I'm charging for Christmas lights. But he sent out a crew of about 3 guys, 2 trucks, and if I had to estimate, I would say they were there for about 4 or 5 hours. But they did a great job. When they left my house, it was spectacular. It looked better than it had looked since the day I bought it, and it was brand new. But the fact is, my brother, a couple of years later, when I was getting a little bit of, mold or growth or whatever you want to call it around the house that just was an eyesore for me, I asked my brother to come over. My brother's guy charged me $800 to do the same exact spots. And I thought, that's really cheap. Maybe he's doing a deal for me. But then when he left, I had to call him back and ask him to come back because I hated to do it, but it was just so much that was not, you know, taken care of that should have been taken care of the first round. And I didn't mind paying more. It's just he valued himself differently. But even when he left after a second time of coming, I realized the job just wasn't complete, just wasn't to the same quality. So my point would be is a lot of guys just aren't delivering the type of quality to demand, the same prices as this illustration I just described to you.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's probably where most businesses suffer. They don't realize that they actually aren't delivering the type of quality service to demand the type of price that they hear these other guys getting. And that's very true in the Christmas light industry too, believe it or not. People think it's just about sticking Christmas lights on houses, but there's so much more to it. And so that's why we can get $10 to $12 a foot.
Yeah. And that's huge. I mean, a lot of people are not willing to increase their prices because their own limiting beliefs that they think they don't deserve that much money. No one's willing to pay that much money. In reality, like there's tons of people willing to pay that prices, but it's a matter of whether you offer premium service and even deserve to offer those prices in the first place.
Absolutely. And you just said it yourself. It's like if someone believes that no one's willing to pay that, then you're right. They're not, because the psychology in your own mind just gave them the information they needed to hear. I never meet with someone with the idea that they can't afford it. Because if I don't believe it myself, then the terminology that's running out of my mouth is going to be caught by the buyer. I could tell you there's a whole psychology of words that if people really were to study it, you will realize when something's too expensive. I'll share another illustration that really woke me up, and this was in recent years. I'm still learning. I, it's very few days I don't go with trying to fill myself with more education, and I learn things constantly on a weekly basis. But I was in the hot tub market. But if I was going to buy a hot tub, I wanted a quality hot tub, and I really didn't understand one hot tub over the other hot tub. But I drove by this pool company every week, and out front they had hot tubs sitting right there on the side of the road, kind of like a car being on display. They would display the hot tubs, and inside of the hot tub they had this big sign, $5,900. And I thought, okay, $5,900. Now maybe that's not the best quality one. Maybe that guy's advertising the cheaper version of a hot tub. And so I told my wife, I said, well, if we're going to buy a hot tub, we want to do this around Christmas. We have 6 children, and we thought, okay, it's got to be big. It's got to be, a good quality one. We want it to hold up. But we're going to do this right at Christmas. So I went by that company, and it was, sure enough, there was hot tubs for $5,900. And then he showed me some bigger ones that could, you know, have 8 people in the tub at a time. And they were a little bit more expensive. So I went back and told my wife, I said, hey, we're looking at close to $10,000 buy this hot tub. So do we want to do it now for Christmas, or we want to wait? She said, no, let's do it. So I said, well, I want to do research because this guy didn't educate me a lot other than the capacity. You know, I learned, so I said, I'm gonna do some research online. So I learned online that there is quality differences, right? And so I found hot springs was a particular one model I was looking at, and I found a hot springs dealer near one of my companies about 2.5 hours from here. And so while I was in that area, it's Williamsburg, Virginia, is where it was. I went by this hot springs dealer one evening, and I walked in, and right away there was a sales rep there that specifically understood hot tubs, and I knew it within the first few minutes because as soon as I told him what I was looking for, he said, "Well, you don't want to look at these then." So he took me over to a whole new section, and right away, from the surface level, I could tell the difference in quality. It wasn't the surface level that sold me though. It was all what was on the inside, and what that hot tub quality brought me in the long run and over the life of the hot tub. So I share this story, Michael, with you because I told my wife that we were going to be spending about $10,000. Now, what I didn't tell you is I'd been telling her about $6,000 because I'd been seeing the sign every day for the last 2 years. I thought to myself that's what it was. So I wanted to let her know that, hey, we're going to spend 10,000 instead. Well, after I met with this guy at Hot Springs and looked at the tub I really wanted, now I'm at 22,000. Almost, a little over 2,000, two times what I originally was thinking, but almost four times the amount of what I originally thought until, and two times more than I told my wife. But I had been convinced by the time I was done with that conversation with that gentleman that this is the tub I need. And I ended up buying that tub. And I could tell you, I'm very much thankful, after owning that tub for a while now, that I spent the money I did for it and understand the difference in quality. And we vacation a lot. We stay at Airbnbs. We're staying at homes with a family of 8 and taking friends with you. Sometimes it's 10 or 12 of us. You're always finding big homes with hot tubs, and I have yet to find too many hot tubs that can compare to the level of quality of what I have. In a lot of cases, the hot tubs don't work properly. I haven't had any problems with mine. So it's just if you get a real education and understanding of certain things, you will realize there's a huge difference in quality. And not everyone's going to go out and buy a $22,000 hot tub. I get that, but that's because those particular hot tubs aren't marketing towards those particular clients. And sometimes in the power washing industry or in the home service industries or the Christmas light industry, we're just marketing to the wrong people. And you've got to understand who that client is that you want to target and what kind of quality service you're going to provide. And then understand what the profit margin is to do that. And if you can do that, you'll be successful at almost anything.
So that's really interesting. What you're saying is you basically were willing to pay 4 times the cost of what you initially thought it was, and you had no idea the actual literal difference between product to product, but just from the experience you had leading up to the purchase. And
That's
then
correct.
it's the same
Yeah.
exact thing with home services. They're sold before they ever see you actually provide the service. So people are willing to spend 4 or 5 times more than other quotes if you give them an amazing experience that's like incomparable to other companies, and that's before they even see your actual service.
Yeah. And Michael, I don't know if you even do this. It's like with clients I work with, I have guys call me all over the country or contact me through Messenger or whatever, and will ask for me to work with them and look at what they're doing or just pick my brain or whatever. And the first thing I do, and this is what any company can do for themselves if you really want to help yourselves, evaluate yourself from a customer perspective all the way through. You know, even if it sounds weird, record yourself. Ask. Going through a conversation with someone and the questions they ask you, how you rebuttal. And when you re-listen to that, you'll realize there's a lot of things you're doing that are impacting the quality of your service, and you're diminishing the value of what you are trying to deliver. What I find is even myself, 25 years, you know, successful on paper in a lot of ways to people, it still doesn't mean that I don't need to do the same thing on a regular basis. We realized some techniques we were using in our telephone conversations recently were things we needed to change. And I caught it by overhearing it. But then I said, let's record these conversations for a week or two. And I want to hear the conversations between our staff and the customer. And let's pick out the things that aren't good or the value of what we're doing. And we had a real intervention session with our staff and said, hey, look, this isn't good. Don't use this language in the future. You diminish the value. So, anybody that works for me probably is scared to even talk on the phone in front of me because I stopped afterwards and said, hey, that conversation went really well. I thought you handled that well. But there's one word you used, one word that you can adjust that will give the type of value that we're delivering. And the word choice might be simple. It could be the words of instead of using but, using the word and. You know, instead of, accepting the objection, say, have you ever considered, there's little words and changes of your tone too that you can do that would change the conversation. But one of the things I do is I specifically I want to hear the conversation that you're having with your customers. Create value for your company right now. And if guys can do that right away, that's a good sign. If they can't and they hesitate, I'm like, then you're hesitating with customers. The other thing I would do is I would look at their marketing, look at their websites, look at how are people, because what are you going to do, Michael? When you're looking at buying, a new product or a service, locally, you're probably going to go online and do your own research, right? And so, I don't know if you're married or not, but if you are, you probably know what I'm talking about. But the wife is notorious for going on the phone and looking up everything about the company before you even had time to even talk to the company on the phone. And so if she's interested at some level in the type of service that you need, she's going to do her own due diligence and she's going to give her opinion. And so believe me, if your marketing information online is below average or only average, then you're only going to be able to deliver average in the end to the customer because you've already giving them the information they need about your average. So you need to do things on a level that is above average in order to give yourself that value increase.
Yeah. That's so basically what you're saying is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you want to have premium pricing, you need to have a premium website, premium sales process. Everything you do needs to be a premium.
Yeah. And just to give people kind of an idea, if you want, you can go look at my website. It's elfpros.com. But that website is going to cost you about $10,000 to do a website like that. Now, to a lot of guys that are entry level, they're like, I'm not paying $10,000 to do a website. Well, then you know what? If you're going to spend a couple thousand, get as close to that as you can. Try to perfect it in any way possible. And so if you told me even 10 years ago, I'd be paying $10,000 for websites, but most of my websites that we've built are between the $7,000 and $10,000 mark. Now, there's a lot of back end things that my website does that no one would even understand because of the purpose of growing the Christmas Light Inn business. But we know that, and we've set all that up initially to give us the control we needed moving forward. So I would say $5,000 to $7,000 is usually what it's going to cost for a really good quality website, and people don't even realize that. Most people have never gotten those type of quotes because they're not searching the right, places.
Yeah. And to your point, like you might not be able to afford that price yet, but that also means you're probably not a premium brand yet. So there's levels to it. Obviously, you want to work up to it, but the goal ultimately should be if you're going to be charging that premium price, everything, including your website, is, a premium.
Yeah. And a guy that's only doing $100,000 a year, you're probably not going to do $5,000 even website, right? I get that. But what I would ask you is like, what ultimately is your goal? And if that's your goal, then you need to believe in yourself that if you were to design a $5,000 website, that it would generate the type of interest and value that you need to get to that next level. So you need to prioritize the investments that you're making in your business. And let's be honest, almost on a daily basis, I would say every one of us are going to websites, right? We're all generating information from the internet. So why would that not be something you would pay a high priority on? And that's just kind of the way I had to accept it, right? I realized that there was things, and I go through cycles, right? I realize, oh, we're not doing something well as a company. We need to adjust this. We need to put a system in place. And then 3 years later, I'm like, oh, we're doing really well there. And then another 2 years goes by. Wait a minute. What happened? We got complacent. You know, we evolved and grew and got to a point where we forgot we need to make more adjustments. We need to invest more. And so that's something you have to constantly be doing. I don't care if next year you have that hit that $1 million mark. Guess what? You better adjust yourself real quick and figure out what it is you're not doing well. And by the way, whatever you're doing well, look at that, because what you're doing well now might not be compatible moving forward. And so you got to look at those things too. It's not just the areas you're not doing well.
Yeah. It's never a set, the create type of thing and just set it and leave it as is. You're always monitoring, always trying to improve. Even the stuff that worked a year ago even might not work today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think
And
that's a
so,
I think that's a flaw within businesses, right? Because you're a young guy, and you've been successful in your own right as such a young guy, generating so much interest and doing your own thing. But even things that you're doing now, that have worked really well. Maybe it was a marketing tool that you use to generate interest, right? Yeah, it works, and keep doing it while it's working. But start looking now at other opportunities, because guess what's going to happen? Your competition's going to watch you. They're going to say, "Yeah, that works really well for Michael. I'm going to do that." And then everyone's doing it. So now to really set yourself apart, you got to do something different.
yeah, of course. Well, cool. So, I want to backtrack a little bit and talk a bit about margins because it seems like that's a big focus of yours right now, and I'm sure you have a lot of value you can provide in that regard. First off, do you mind, to whatever extent you can, kind of sharing like how much profit you guys are doing across all the businesses? Then I would like to, from there, kind of dive into if you're evaluating one of your companies, how do you even go about seeing where you guys are in terms of profit margin, and then what are you doing to actually improve that?
So business wise, they're all different. They really are. My goal is to get every company over 30%. Um, the reality is though, and it is my biggest company, my sign manufacturing company, but it's also my lowest percentage of margin. Um, so there is a subscription to a magazine I have in the sign industry, and in my years of following that, and I'm talking all the way back from the 90s till now, that magazine has been pretty consistent on the averages of what sign companies do. An actual good sign company only has about 16 or 17% profit margin at the end of the year. So you can look at that and say, okay, that doesn't seem very, very good in comparison to, right, maybe the Christmas light industry. But in reality, it really is if you look at the whole dynamic of how a company is structured and the way it works. Now, I don't accept 16, 17%. But that's kind of the average of what they say you have to be at to be sustainable. Now, once you get below that 10%, you've got problems. You need to internally look at whether this company is worth keeping the way you're doing it, or if you need to revamp and try some different things. But the fact is, we've always been around that 15 and above. Now, we've been most of the averages we've produced in the sign industry in the 20 to 22%. I have had 25 to 27%. But the sign company has never done over 30%. The sign company, I hate to say, as much as it is my biggest company, it's the company I feel like we need to be more profitable. And listen, we've sought to do that this year. I've already, within the first 2 months, made some huge changes, things that we haven't been doing in years that I felt like were essential to us having that profitability. We've and we don't ever cut corners. I don't want to give you that impression, but we've be realized where we can be more efficient. We've realized where we're overspending. Um, all of our guys that we have a lot of techs that go out on a daily basis, and they're driving $200,000 trucks. Some cases driving $350,000 trucks. We have boom trucks and bucket trucks and cranes. And this sounds like a little thing, right? But it really isn't. What we realize is guys were coming into the shop in the morning. And in Virginia, it's cold in the mornings here this time of year. So the guys would go start their trucks. Well, our trucks have monitoring devices on it. So I looked at the GM and I said, I came in earlier this morning and 3 trucks were sitting outside idling while guys were loading the trucks up. Well, 30 minutes later, I left and 2 of those trucks were still sitting outside idling. And so I said, I want you to monitor how much idle time there is. And the next day he texted me and said, well, just this morning, we had over 4 hours of idle time. Now, you think about 4 hours of idle time with the amount of trucks, it doesn't seem like a lot, but at the end of the day, that's 4 hours of fuel that's being burnt. So we made a rule that our guys are no longer allowed to let a truck idle for more than 10 minutes. It might be reasons to let a truck idle in the mornings. Most of these trucks are diesel, but 10 minutes is the max. So you're now accountable for your truck. Our trucks are monitored. Like I said, it will tell us if it goes over that 10-minute mark. And we monitor that now. Sounds like a little thing, but it's really a huge thing because 4 hours in a week is 20 hours. 20 hours in a month. You could do the math. And you know that diesel, and at least in this area, is over $4 a gallon. And those trucks don't get more than 8 to 12 miles a gallon. So it doesn't take a lot to run through money when you're just idle time. And so we have to look at ourselves on a constant basis and say, okay, how can we improve to be more profitable? With our other companies, most of them are at 25 to 30%. Ultimately, my goal is to get over 30% in every company. I know of guys who are doing far less profitability than we are, but I also know guys that are doing well over 30%. And I've seen their books, and they're really good books. I coach a couple now who have been in business for only a few years. They doubled their sales in less than 6 months working with me. But that wasn't even my focus. I was watching their profitability increase at the same time. And so I was learning from them as much as they were learning from me. And I realized there was just a little things they were doing that, if applied properly within any organization, could increase the profitability. And so it's much easier when you have a small company, when there's only a few of you, or if you're a solopreneur, to watch your spending. But when I have guys that have credit cards that are going out every day making purchases, you'll see real quick that it's on a regular basis, we're spending, over $100,000 just at Home Depot, Lowe's, and like the retail, department stores. And that's a month, and so we cut down the spending on retail purchases because a lot of it's for things that we can pre-order and get a much better rate on. And yet our guys were procrastinating on restocking their trucks. And then they were stuck in a bind where they were on a job site and they realized they needed a tool. And in some cases, the tools were costing hundreds of dollars because it's a specialty tool that they left at the shop. So we just, we had to examine that. How do we do this differently? So I think, you have to look internally at your business. Where are you spending money? It might be in salaries, right? You can overpay employees. Now, I don't look at someone's salary generally, and I have guys that are making a lot of money. I never imagined paying guys doing the jobs they're doing the type of money we're paying them. But the reality is there's a certain value that comes with that. Now, there could be guys that are making, $50 an hour that are not producing $50 an hour. And you have to be real with yourself and with that individual to realize if they live up to that value. But I have to take each individual person and determine whether or not that person brings the type of value that we pay them. But if you have 10 people on staff and no one makes over $20 an hour, you probably have a problem. And the reason I would say that is because the type of value that $20 an hour guys and below bring, it usually doesn't measure up to the type of value you need to increase your business value to the customer on a regular basis. So I'm going to need a couple guys in there that have certain skill sets that maybe the $20 an hour guy doesn't. Now, there's also guys that get paid $20 an hour that aren't worth it. And you need to be honest with yourself and say, this guy isn't, he's sluggish. He brings down the morale. He's not worth having around. I will hire a guy all day long because of attitude before I ever will because of his resume. And so I try to look into that, see where guys' personality traits are on a daily basis. How do they handle pressure at home and bring it to work? What's their situation like? So those are the two key areas I would focus on. Is how are you spending your money? You know, where can you get rid of unnecessary spending? And I would focus on your employees. Focus on specifically what you're paying them and what kind of value they bring to you. But I never would have imagined bringing in employees and paying them to the level I am now. But when I realized the type of skill sets they have and what they bring to the company and how they help the company in multiple ways, I'm willing to pay them 100,000 plus.
Yeah. And to be able to do things like that, it goes back to charging what you're actually worth, like you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's amazing. So I think the biggest takeaway I got from that for anyone watching this video is just know your numbers. Like there's so many people that they don't even bother checking where their money is going, what their expenses look like, comparing it to their revenue. They're just not checking, and so they have no idea. But I'm sure most of these people can literally, especially on a smaller scale, like you could double your profit margin by just cutting out the stuff you realize you don't need to be spending money on.
Yeah. What's funny, Michael, is statistically, most companies have no clue what their true cost of doing business is on a monthly basis. And so I have to ask myself, if that's the case, then why are you in business? Because if you really don't know how much it's costing you to run this organization, this business, then how can you know what to charge? How can you truly know what to charge? And so I think too many of us get wrapped up on what everyone's telling them online. And and I know I've been on a lot of the group forums that are available, and they can be great resources. I'm sure the information that people are in your groups are distributing can be great information, but you have to learn to use discernment, and you have to recognize too that not everyone knows what they're talking about. And if you take just the law of averages, the the majority of business owners have no clue what they're talking about. And I learned that the hard way because I did things the same way everyone else was doing for years, taking the advice of other business owners, not realizing that those guys weren't living up to the level of a true business owner. And so I'm in a fortunate situation now where I've got smarter people than myself working for me. I've got a team of people that help me implement systems. Um, you know, the great thing about having six kids is now I get to enjoy that time with them. My wife and I like to travel. We homeschool, so it makes it very practical for us. We can just take the school with us, and we'll go off for a couple of weeks. We have an RV, and we go off and enjoy life, which you should. But if you're a business owner and you know right now that if I said, hey, Michael, next week your wife and your kids all want to run off to the West Coast, and to drive an RV out there and back is going to take 4 weeks. Can you do that? And you say, no way. Then you need to really look hard at your business and what you could do to make that happen. And so that's ultimately should be your goal, because if you do that, then now the business is sellable, whether you want to sell it or not. Now you can sell it. And so that turned into my goal, and I saw after to do that, and I was able to do that, accomplish that.
That's amazing. And just by following the principles you spoke about today, knowing your numbers, making sure margins are where they need to be, and hiring the right people, not the guy that's doing 18, $20 an hour. They might be a premium employee that you're going to have to pay more for, but that'll allow you to delegate way more in your business. And once you actually, exactly like you said, you can take time off and your business grows without you. In my opinion, that's when you have a real business.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think that needs to be the goal of any business owner, regardless, right? Even if you're a solopreneur, focus on that idea, right? Because this is where I made the mistake. I got into business. Really, I thought it was going to be kind of a side hustle. I still had a full-time job when I first started. And then it turned into a legitimate business. People were asking, I always laugh because I tell people this. I'd only put decals on race cars and on trailers and trucks. I opened up a sign company, and my first job was a sign, and I was shocked. I was like, wait a minute, I don't even know how to make a sign. But it's a true story. So I learned real quick that, oh, wow, businesses really want to use me for this. I was thinking I was just going to do car graphics the rest of my life. But if I got the word sign in my advertisements, I think I should do signs. So, but I worked really hard. I grew up on a farm, and I spent every hour I had trying to be successful as a sign guru. I wanted to learn signs because as soon as I got the first order, I was like, I don't know enough. So I sought after to learn signs, signs, signs. So my whole life evolved over the sign, myth and learning all about signs. And as if I grew up in the industry. And within 5 to 10 years, I knew a lot about signs. But what I didn't realize is I didn't learn the business of running a business. I didn't understand what it meant. And we started having kids. My wife, quit her job, stayed at home. We just had enough money to get by. But here's the thing, I wasn't home. 6 o'clock roll around. My wife's breaking bread in front of all of our kids, and there's no dad. And then dad's at work, and he doesn't come home till midnight. And then he gets up the next morning and is gone by 6. And I thought, man, I'm doing a great job for my kids because I'm providing the home they live in, providing the food they eat on a daily basis. We can homeschool them. We have running vehicles. And I thought, man, I've hit the American dream. But truly, that wasn't good because I was not providing the time that they needed as children. And one of my children at some point said, Dad, are you coming to my play tonight? And I said, Son, I'm not going to be able to be there. I got some work commitments. I'm not going to get off till probably 10 o'clock. He goes, That's what I thought you were going to say. He goes, You never come. And that was like a dagger in the heart, Michael. That was a wake up call for me. And I realized I did not want to run a business that obligates me to lose all that time. And I heard this statistic that between birth and 18, you will have spent 90% of your hours that you're going to spend with your children. And I thought, wow, my oldest son's already 10 years old. I've already spent 45%, the majority or the half of my life hours with him, and the rest of the half is coming up. Now he's in college, he's 21 years old. And so when I realized this, I realized I had to be more efficient with my time. I need to figure out how to delegate. I need to learn how to do things differently. So I know that a lot of this stuff I'm sharing is like next level thinking, but this is the kind of stuff you got to think about now. And if you want to be a successful business owner, you got to quit thinking, oh, I'm just going to get to $100,000 and I might hire one employee. No, you got to think about all this stuff now and start building your time block, start building your life around the idea. Because if you say, well, I have to work really hard now in order to get to the level that Paul Gardner is at, then you're going to hurt yourself getting there. And it's going to be a lot of pain involved that you don't need. What you need to do is set the stage now and say, you know what, no matter what, I'm not working past 6 o'clock. Now, an emergency comes up, you do it. But I'm not working past 6 o'clock. I'm going to be home. I'm going to break bread with my kids every night. I'm going to put them to bed. And I'm going to get up earlier the next morning so I can make sure that happens. If you can do that now, you will scale your business and continue to have that type of success. But if you don't do it now, it's going to be harder to implement that when you're busier. I can guarantee it.
Yeah. That is a massive wake up call for a lot of people listening, I'm sure. So a lot of people are just stuck in the hamster wheel. They're focused on the next job, the next thing, but they're not thinking long term. So if they can make that shift now, then exactly like you said, you could build the business of your dreams that allows you to spend time with your family, travel, do whatever it is you want to do. So that is amazing advice.
Yeah. And by the way, I say that and repeat what I just did to you to remind myself why that's so important. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like the self affirmation of building your character up. Say things and repeat them so you remember yourself. Because I have to be reminded still because I'm such a serial entrepreneur that I'm getting into so much at so many times that I have to check myself. Wait a minute, does that obligate me to time outside of the time for my children? I need to think about doing this before I obligate myself to it. So know it's
Yeah.
for me as much as anyone else.
Yeah, it's important to always remember your why. But
Yeah.
with that being said, I know we're out of time here. So again, I appreciate you hopping on. That was super valuable. For anyone, I know you're a bit low key online, but for anyone that wants to maybe connect with you, learn a bit more about you, your businesses, how can they do so?
Well, I know I'm on Facebook. Yeah, people find a way of finding me and finding my cell phone even number. But if you want to reach out to me, my email is paul@paulgardner.com. So that's PaulGardner.com. Feel free to just shoot me an email, paul@paulgardner.com. And if you want to hit me up on Facebook, I generally don't accept a lot of friend requests, but if you just send me a message and say, hey, I love helping people out. I wish I had the type of help in the beginning, or resources in the beginning that I feel like that are out there now. And I want to be as resourceful as possible to people. So my goal ultimately is to provide, the business owner that has the same situation I did going in, the information so they don't have to go through the struggle and the failures I did. Learn from other people's failures. It's good to fail yourself, but learn from other people's failures. I think that's the best way, if you can do that as quickly as possible.
100%. Well, once again, thank you for coming on, Paul. That was super valuable.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Michael.